Hey everyone, it's Emorja, and we're back for one more episode of Black at ND. And so for those who are following my Instagram, you saw maybe a couple of months ago, I had purchased this book and I had put it on my stories about the Unapologetic Guide to Black Mental Health by Dr. Rheeda Walker. And I have her here today, which is I'm so excited. Dr. Walker, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm glad to be here. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing good. You know, it's funny because when I put the post up on my page, my cousin, she was like, "Oh, I just talked to her today." I was like, "Wow, it's a small world."
It is a small world and it's getting smaller and smaller each day.
I'm telling you, I am. So let's sort of just jump right into it. Yeah, what inspired you to write the book?
So I'm sorry, I was just distracted by the Amazon person talking loudly on my front porch. Like, we're not supposed to know that you're delivering, just deliver and go on. But I
I know,
wrote,
right?
there are a lot of reasons I realize at this point because I get this question and there are so many things that go through my mind, to be honest. But
Yeah.
I will say the thing that made me write the book at the time when I wrote it was what I saw as a crisis of mental
Mm,
health in our community that seemed to be manifesting through our young children. I've been thinking about Black mental health for more than 20 years.
yeah.
And so I didn't even realize, I guess, how much I'd been thinking about it until I started writing. But I had to write because of what was going on with our children.
Yeah, I totally get it. It's so true. Now, when did you start writing it? And how long did it take you to put this together?
That's an interesting question. So I think I got the contract in 20, wow, this is 2021.
Yeah, I know, right?
In 2018. So it was 2018 that we saw the second round, and the crisis, I'll go ahead and tell your audience, was suicide, was Black children taking their own lives, as you know from reading the book.
Yeah, yeah,
And that was new. And the statistics showed up, I guess, about 2017. And I started thinking about the book. And you know how the universe just kind of converges when you start thinking about something, but then you're like, yeah, I don't know. And then the universe is like, oh no, I'm gonna show you all the reasons why you need to do this.
yeah.
That happened for me because I saw the
Hmm.
statistics. I thought that they were maybe a blip on the screen, and then they popped up again. And through a series of events, the book
Yeah.
came about, and the timing of it coming out in 2020 in May of last year, I had
Okay.
nothing to do with that.
Okay. Got you. Well, you know, so when I started digging into it, it's funny because most times when I get into books, I'm like, I gotta read it and listen to the end. But I read quite a bit of it. Can you explain to our listeners, for those who actually need to get this book, what is psychological fortitude?
Psychological fortitude was a language that I coined because I know that we don't want to talk about mental health.
Hmm.
And I get it because we think of mental health as somebody saying you crazy or you weak or something wrong with you,
Right.
like that's the conversation that we have in our head. But at the end of the day, each one of us needs to be able to be successful in life, and we can't do that without our minds.
Yeah.
So we need to be able to go to work. We need to be able to do well in our classes. We need to be able to get up for class. Like,
Yes.
we have all
Yes.
kinds of responsibilities. We have to be able to, some of us have health concerns. We got to be
Yeah.
able to take care of our health. All of that takes our minds. But for Black folks, we add a layer of the day-to-day threats to doing all of those things that we need to do for ourselves and to take care of, sometimes not just ourselves, but
Hmm.
our communities. And so me
Yeah.
recognizing that we don't want to talk about mental health, I was like, okay, what can we talk about?
Yeah.
We can talk about handling our business. And so on some level, psychological fortitude is about our ability to handle our business, knowing that, we're going to face racism. We're going to
Yeah.
face threats just because we show up as Black. We have no
Yeah.
control over that. And so we need to be able to give a 0 to 10 rating. I make it easy. 0 to 10. Zero is you have no PF or no psychological fortitude to manage your health, to
Yeah.
manage your, class responsibilities. You have no ability to be able to even live out your life purpose, because I believe that we were all here also put here for a reason.
Oh, certainly.
And so the 10 is that we can do all those things.
Mhm.
And oftentimes I know, folks are just like, yeah, I'm doing all right. I'm doing fine. What does that mean? What does that really
Yes.
mean? So
Yes.
PF is that 0 to 10 rating of your ability to be able to do all the things you're responsible for doing. If it falls below a 6, we definitely need to make some adjustments. If
Yes.
you're at 7 or higher, great.
Yes. Yeah. And you know, it's so funny you mentioned that. I literally just recorded something not long ago speaking about how it's like give yourself the space to not be okay and honor that. Because a lot of times, and this is actually in the same section with this, we have this tendency to be very resilient, which is part of our community. However, I think sometimes there's a good side and there's the bad side of it. Have you run into any people that are resilient, but it may not always be in their favor, only because sometimes when we're resilient, we tend to ignore the fact that when we're not doing okay, we just let it go without acknowledging it and doing something about it. But what's your take on resilience in the Black community? The pros and cons, I guess.
Well, it's why we need to assess our PF, because we're taught that. My generation was taught you work twice as hard to get half as far.
Yeah, yeah,
That must be exhausting, right?
yes,
You can't just push past all the time. And so I do think that there are limits to resilience.
mm,
So it's good to have a mindset that is, I can handle this, I can take care of this, what they got next. Like
yeah,
that's good to have that mindset.
yeah,
But when it starts to wear on us,
yeah,
so that we're not being effective, it's time to make some adjustments. So resilience is good. We got to have it. We got to have a mindset of success.
yeah,
And also we need to be able to, honor ourselves and our
yeah,
mindset and our spirit and our body when it's just like, you got to take a time out now.
yeah. Very true, very true. And one thing too that really struck me, I grew up in a Black church, as a musician, still do, working on my doctorate here at Notre Dame as well. And, we're always taught, take to the Lord in prayer. But therapy was never mentioned when I was growing up in Defuniak Springs, Florida. Which I think half the people there need some therapy now that I think about it. But my thing is this now. What have you run into? I'll say this, what is the Black church's response? Or that, I guess, regularly when it comes down to therapy, or what it has been in the past compared to what it is now?
Well, as you know, I take time with this in the book because I think the response has been disappointing,
Yeah,
to be
yeah,
honest. There, in the same way that there's limitations to resilience, there's limitations to the tools that the
yeah,
church has. Now, that's not to say there's limitations on God. And I think maybe
yeah,
that's what people are saying, like, well, you're limiting God if you're saying, you got to do these other things,
yeah.
which I find fascinating because we send people to doctors and physicians,
Exactly.
we send folks to get help. But yeah, so I desperately want for the church to do more. And to be honest, I do see it in pockets of the church, right? Like
Yeah,
there are churches, I do think that some of the larger churches who do have, pastors who have
mhm.
mental health training,
I've
they have
seen that.
mental health ministries.
Yeah,
So I see that. And what I have actually said, to folks at my own church, which is actually pretty large, is, but we need y'all talking about it from the pulpit. Like,
thank
that's
you.
great that we have staff over here that people can
Yes.
call, but it still gets compartmentalized.
Yeah,
And we need from the pulpit for
yeah,
pastors to say, it's okay to see a mental health professional because
yes,
I'm not trained to help you with your severe PTSD
yes,
or your substance use. That's
yes.
not what I do. And it may be the case that even the leader of this ministry, you
Mhm.
know, that person may not have what they need either.
That is true.
So I need the church that, and I know Black folks are actually leaving the church in droves, and
I know.
especially younger and
I
younger
know.
generations. But I think that the more that the church can be helpful to the whole person,
Yeah,
that we will see people even potentially going back to the church for what they
yeah.
need.
And I really wonder what is the ratio for those who just randomly think of those who may see a therapist based upon denominations. Um, because I know sometimes there are different teachings, different doctrines, different thoughts as it relates to, I guess maybe solely depending upon God. And I say that because I know somebody who's part of the Apostolic Church and they don't believe in taking medicine. They don't believe in going to the doctor. And I've heard this before from several people, and it's usually an older generation that I hear this from. So, of course, generational thinking does change, but I'm wondering, does it? I don't know.
I think so. I've seen it. And
Okay.
part of it has been through the media and some of our entertainers. And
Yeah.
when we think about shows like Insecure, that was
Yeah.
part of the storyline,
Insecure.
going to
Yes.
see a therapist.
Yeah.
And so I think that when we do see mental health integrated into some of our mainstream, that folks are willing to consider it. And we probably need to see more of that.
Hmm.
The challenge, unfortunately, is that there are a lot of people who need help I'm a university professor. I talk to students all the time,
Yeah.
and they say, when they talk to older relatives, they're like, pray about it, you'll be fine.
That's
And
it.
sometimes when they talk to their peers, they still get discouraged from getting professional help. So I think we still got a long way to go, but
Yeah.
I am optimistic about the younger generations for sure.
Yeah, very true. And you mentioned something, I hate I can't find the page right now, about this unnecessary struggle that the Black community tends to carry. Could you explain what that is and why we tend to do that?
Well, I mean, there are a few things that we struggle with.
Yeah.
And let me say this, because we have had, we've had generations of struggle.
Hmm.
If we can take anything from that, it is evidence that we can overcome just about anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it is data. When I think about myself as a scientist, you look well in our society, we're supposed to look at the data, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We have tremendous data. And it seems to me that somehow we lose sight of what it means of what we've overcome.
Mm.
That whatever it took for us to get through chattel slavery, to get through
Yes.
Jim Crow, we
Yeah.
got Jim Crow 2 right now. Okay, well, how do we deal with Jim Crow 1? Like we have that, systemic and historical memory that
Yeah.
can get us through. And guess what? We have more resources.
Yeah.
And so it's like if we can but what we don't have, unfortunately, is the collective sense of identity. And that's why I talk
Yes.
so much in the book about, tapping into what it means to be a Black person. And so we've gotten hoodwinked on some level, thinking
Yeah.
that, if we buy into mainstream society, then
Yeah.
like,
Exactly.
that's the way to go.
Exactly.
Well, we can't take our eye off the prize.
Yeah.
If we can achieve, whatever it is that we think is important while still maintaining connection to the community, that's going to get us through. And so when we figure that out, I think we'll be a lot better off.
Yeah, and I love that you said knowing what it means to be Black. And I'm just sort of thinking, what does it mean to be Black? I mean, there are so many different lenses we could come from to answer that question. But if someone asked you this question on an elevator as you were going from the first floor to the sixth floor, what would be your definition of that?
Ooh,
I know,
I'll
right?
say the first word that comes to mind, but then I'm like, but no, that's not a good one. But the first word that comes to mind is in fact magical. And I
Wakanda forever. Yes.
I pause with that because I do think that we see magic as some sort of like mysterious thing that exists out in the ether,
Yeah.
rather than seeing it as we have the creativity and the ability to create whatever we need.
Yes.
It's always been
Yes.
there.
Yeah. Go back to Africa. It starts with music. That's one for sure. And then also, of course, the things that we probably didn't get credit for coming up, and for Black history that we're still finding out. But yeah, I agree. That's
And
interesting.
so, and we use that and we can tap into that when problems arise. And so it's like, okay, they got something new. What do we have for that? Like I will say that I get frustrated because there's a lot of reaction, like things happen and we're reactive.
Yeah.
And we have the ability to get ahead of a lot of stuff.
Mhm.
Folks keep asking, what's it going to take for things to change? Every other day, there's a shooting,
Just
there's
like
something
yesterday.
traumatic happening, pick a day, Tuesday,
Yeah.
Wednesday, Thursday.
Yeah.
At what point do we realize that we have it within us? Now, that's not my ministry, and we all have to
Yeah.
figure out what our ministry is, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Exactly.
what is our individual responsibility? And it saddens me that I think there are people who have the solutions in them,
Hmm.
but they're weighed down by depression,
Yeah.
they're weighed down by anxiety, and weighed down by untreated trauma.
Yeah.
And so the solutions are there, but we gotta dig them out.
Yeah.
And so part of me writing the book and recognizing that yes, there's a crisis in the youth, but there are a whole lot of others of us who not in our youth anymore,
Yeah.
who need to tap into something to lift our community up collectively.
That is so true. And you mentioned something, the D word, depression. How do people know that they are depressed, or how do they even recognize that they are?
Well, I will say this about depression, and I actually did a YouTube video because of when Forever First Lady Michelle Obama talked about her depression, and I
Yes.
was like,
Yes.
I don't know if people really understand this depression thing. I think she called it mild or minor depression. She might have said a
Okay.
mild depression. That when clinical psychologists and other mental health professionals talk about depression, it's really a constellation of things. Like it's not a single thing. It's difficulties with sleep, it's difficulties eating, it's problems with concentration. It is also sometimes like a low mood,
Yeah.
a low mood or a lack of interest in, just like life.
Yeah.
Or also, I would say people who are uninspired. I've been wondering about our definitions of depression because they look different, I think, in our community. We don't have a lot of science around it, but we have some preliminary work. And so when clinical psychologists and other, like I said, other professionals talk about depression, it is you checking off not all of these, but a lot of these different symptoms that come together to manifest as this umbrella term that is depression. So those things that I mentioned, low mood, for some people it's irritability. So it's unexplained irritability. But now if there's things happening, there's a reason to be irritable, then that's different. But it's just if it
just happens.
And that, like I said, and for other people, it includes thoughts about suicide or taking their own life. Those aren't natural thoughts. And people have them all the time and don't know, what to do with them. For some people, it freaks them out. For some people, they go and pray about it. And if prayer means finding a mental health professional to help with diagnosis, or if it means, coming up with a plan, because for some people, especially, in COVID, folks are at home, struggling with not having connections with friends and loved ones. Like that's important. A lot of people have been feeling depressed.
And it's funny because people, once they ended up not being able to hug somebody or to touch them, they realized how important physical contact is. Yes, especially in church. Like no more fellowship. We'll wave at you from like 10 feet away, but those things really do matter. It's something interesting too that I read in the book, and I was like, oh, I can hear somebody saying this. You mentioned in there how there was, I'll give a paraphrasing example where there is somebody who may have lived with high blood pressure, and they're like, well, so and so did it, I can do it too. This mentality that we are, how would you even describe that? Is that like a mentality of being okay with not being okay? Like how would you describe that?
I think that we have gotten really comfortable with pain.
Thank you. Yes.
That things have been so bad. We've been fighting for so long. It's like you come to expect that things aren't going to go your way. We teach our sons how to survive the encounter with police. Like, what if we lived in a world where we didn't have to teach our sons that? What if we lived in a world where you went to the hospital for medical care and you didn't have to be concerned that the doctor might not give you what you need because you're Black? Like, where the teachers would, treat students fairly in the classroom. Like, imagine that. I don't think a lot of people can, to be honest. And so we've adapted to, pain, feeling like maybe we don't deserve better. And that doesn't feel good, but somehow we press on, right?
Yeah, it's crazy. And this is somewhat ties in there. It reminds me, have you seen this show on Amazon Prime called Them?
I cannot watch anything that's scary.
I will tell you this. It's interesting because there's this Black couple who moves into a white neighborhood and they do not want them there. They're trying to have a better life, but yet there are so many obstacles. They are trying every which way to get them out of there. And so in my mind, I'm like, some things really have not changed, because I've seen that happen recently where there's this Black couple who moved into a neighborhood. And for example, the price of their home was not equal compared to everyone else's. And it's like, just when, like you said, how would it be? What would life be like if we didn't have to worry if, the white man is getting paid? I'm sorry, if we're getting paid as much as the white man. Because I'm watching New Amsterdam, he found out that Black men are getting paid 3% less than the other doctors. So it's like, yeah, there are so many questions to ask and sometimes not enough answers.
Exactly. And it seems like it'd be nice that we have the brilliance, we have the resources, we have what we need to create the answers.
Yeah.
We have it. And I think sometimes, we just get sidetracked maybe. Well, one, like I said, we're accustomed to, I think, suffering, to be honest. It's built in. You talk about being Black. Being Black a lot of times is about suffering.
And we hear it in church all
Um,
the time.
take it to the Lord.
Yeah.
But then there's also, this idea that, so when I talk about getting distracted as an example, about the voter laws,
Yeah.
voter suppression laws
Yeah.
in Georgia. And, people have been really very upset by the fact that, yeah, you can't take someone water. And yeah, that's problematic that you can't take
Yes.
someone. I'm from Georgia. You
Okay.
want water out there if you're in line and you have
Of
to wait until you
course.
get off from work. But then there's other bigger parts, or as big maybe,
Mm.
wherein your vote can be nullified. And
Yeah.
it's like sometimes we get, distracted by some of these other things that are problematic,
Yeah.
and we miss the part that is, okay, what if you can get water? Are we
Yes.
okay?
Yeah.
Then
Yes.
no, we're not.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
so I'm a fan of Stacey Abrams, and so I
Yeah.
see her as someone who has started to create the solutions. She said, okay, we can work with your rules and we're going to do it our way. And she got ahead of it and she planned and schemed for years. That's what we
Mm.
need to be doing at every single level,
Yeah.
every single level.
I agree. I totally agree. What part of Georgia are you from?
Savannah.
Oh, I have family in Savannah. That's where a lot of my family's from. Okay, we'll talk later. Okay, and so another thing too, which is pretty interesting. We have this thing in the Black community where we do the code switching thing, but in your book you call it mainstream vernacular versus comfortable vernacular. How did you? Well, first of all, have you had experience with this, and what made you talk about this?
Because I live it. It's uh,
Yep.
people tell me all the time they would never guess that I'm from Georgia. I don't
Okay.
know, we having a conversation,
Yeah.
so I don't know if
Yeah.
it comes out as much for our conversation, but yeah, I absolutely know how to show up and not talk, Southern or use African
That's
American
it.
vernacular.
Yeah.
And I learned that from my dad, who didn't even have a college education. He went
Mm.
to college. I mean, he went to
Yeah.
high school, and he got a high school degree. But what he communicated to me and my younger sister was that, you have to sound intelligent.
I know.
You can't go out of here talking the way you talking in the house. And so
Yeah.
I learned very early on that people judged you based on the way that you talk.
Mm-hmm.
And so African American, and so I think I've always been fascinated for that reason. And I've had opportunities to be close to folks, who study African American vernacular English. And I
Really?
think it's important.
Okay.
Absolutely. So Dr. Tracy Weldon, who's on faculty at University of South Carolina, has, so Google, there are a few videos out if you're interested, because
Yeah.
they talk about the roots of how we talk.
Yeah.
It
The dialect.
upsets me that the fact that, the way we talk is considered bad.
I know.
And
Yeah.
even adults would say, don't go out of here, talking that bad English.
Yeah.
What I say to my son is, it's not bad English, it's African American vernacular.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you put prepositional phrases at the end of a sentence, and
Uh-huh.
the way we got 50 Cent, like
Exactly.
that's our vernacular.
Yeah.
And so we need to be able, it's an example of how we embrace all of ourselves, rather than maligning not just our hair, but how we talk, so many different things
Yeah.
about our lives. We need to be able to embrace who we are, because it's part of being part of the collective, of our
Yeah.
collective, not the other
Exactly.
collective.
Exactly. And that helps us to preserve our mental health because we can be ourselves. And it's across the board. We can understand each other. It's just that's just how we are. And maybe it ain't for some of them to understand because it ain't none of y'all business. But hey, that's just us though. So hey. And so before we wrap this thing up, what are some ways that you would recommend for people to maybe regularly self-check their PF?
I think probably one of the easiest strategies is because when things are fine,
Yeah.
folks, you're like, I'm good, right?
Yeah.
But when things start to feel like just something is off,
Yeah.
and for sure, if things aren't going well, to say, you know what, on a 0 to 10, how am I doing?
Yeah.
Like start with an easy number. And I know for, high functioning folks who are like, go-getters, high achievers, like I got to get the number just right.
Yeah.
Well, no, you rate for yourself. And if your rating, like I said, is 6 or lower, something has to change.
Yeah.
So you start with the rating, because when you know what the rating is, then you know if you need to do something. If the rating is consistently, I would say 4 or lower,
Yes.
then it's probably time to do an assessment with a professional.
Yeah.
People ask me all the time, like, well, how do I know? Part of what professionals do is assessment.
Yeah.
is to say if, well, where you are seems to be okay versus it's problematic. Professionals can do that. And professionals can say, like, well, this is something I can help you with versus not. But it starts with being honest. And I think
Yes.
too often, as you know, we aren't honest with ourselves because we
Yeah.
say, well, I can push through this. I'm supposed to just push through this.
Yeah.
And sometimes we push ourselves into a not so good place when we don't honor where we are.
You are saying something. It's very true. Very true. Listen, Dr. Walker, I appreciate you so much. A last couple questions. What's your favorite color?
Right now, it's turquoise.
Okay. All right. Bet. And your favorite art, actually, what's your favorite song?
Interestingly, I'll go with the one that kind of just gets me going, like gets
Yeah.
me hype. And I say it's Beyonce's song, Shining, but it's not Beyonce. It's
Okay.
DJ Khaled's song,
Uh,
Shining.
um, I can hear it. Okay, I gotta go iTunes it really quick in a second. All right, bet. I love it. I love it. How can people follow you and get your stuff? Like, let us know.
Dr. Rheeda Walker, I will spell Rita because it's different because I've been Black all my life. So Rita is Rheed is in Diamond A. So I'm Dr. Rheeda Walker on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. I'm all over Twitters. I'm all over.
All right, bet. I appreciate you so much for coming on here to talk to us. And you all, please go get this book. I am probably one of the strongest advocates on Notre Dame's campus and probably in the South Bend community. So we're going to make this thing happen. All right, thank you so much, Dr. Walker.
Thank you. It's been good to be here.